Joined now by Tyler Horka, blueandgold.com. I'm going to talk Notre Dame. They finished spring practice like a week and a half ago. We were too busy talking about the weapon Joe Alt and where he was going to go in the draft, and Blake Fisher and all these other Notre Dame players. But Tyler, we got to talk about what Notre Dame learned during spring practice. It sounds like they learned quite a bit, even though Riley Leonard, the quarterback, transfer from Duke, was not playing because he had follow-up surgery on the ankle injury that he actually suffered against Notre Dame while playing for Duke last year. And then also somewhat limited receiver. You got Bo Collins from Clemson, not done at Clemson yet. You have Jordan Faison scoring goals as a midi for the Notre Dame lacrosse team. But it feels like the guys who got to play in the spring, the Irish figured some stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. It was crazy. The blue gold game felt exactly like what Notre Dame has had or has not had at wide receiver for the past, 2 or 3 years. There's just been not a lot of numbers in there, not a lot of playmakers there. So Notre Dame goes into this blue gold game with 5 healthy scholarship wide receivers, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, who are these quarterbacks? Riley Leonard not among them because he was not playing in that scrimmage. Who are they going to throw the ball to? And all 5 of those healthy wide receivers made plays. I mean, Jaden Greathouse made plays. Chris Mitchell coming in from Florida International looks fantastic. The freshman Micah Gilbert looks really good. He caught 2 touchdowns in that blue gold game. So you're thinking, okay, this is what Notre Dame had with the only 5 guys who were healthy and available. What are they going to have when they have 11 scholarship receivers slated to be on this team in 2024? You mentioned a couple of them. Bo Collins is going to come back. Jordan Faison is just incredibly talented. You mentioned he's scoring goals. He's scoring a lot of goals for the number 1 Notre Dame men's lacrosse team. So those guys are playmakers. You figure Cam Williams.
Tyler, I got a kid playing lacrosse. Let me put it this way. We watch a lot of Notre Dame lacrosse highlights in our house. So it's they're pretty amazing.
I can't go wrong on social media just tweeting out a clip of Jordan Faison scoring a goal and the entire Notre Dame fan base saying, oh my gosh, this guy's amazing. Because guess what? He was just as good on the football field last year too.
Yeah.
The kid truly is an athletic freak.
Well, the midi in lacrosse has to do everything. Like they have to score, they have to play defense. So like that's an athlete position. And then you look at Jordan Faison on the football field, and he's absolutely an athlete.
And he's also like every bit my size. I shouldn't say every bit, because usually when you're saying that, you're talking about weapons like Joe Alt and Blake Fisher,
right,
like you mentioned. Jordan Faison is probably 5'10", $175, and he's doing all those things that you mentioned on the lacrosse field. And then nobody can really cover him on the football field. I think that's what we missed in Notre Dame spring practice. These last 15 practices, month and a half, whatever it was you have to remember when that kid gets on the field and you put him in the slot, he's going against guys, nickel corners, who are literally out there solely to cover, solely to tackle. And they can't do both of those things when this kid gets in front of them. You can't cover him and you can't tackle him. So that's what I'm saying with Notre Dame's receiver situation. All of a sudden, it feels like even when you don't have a lot, the reinforcements are coming and you're eventually going to have a lot. So if this group stays fully healthy, Notre Dame's going to have a lot of weapons there, and you just got to figure out who's throwing them the ball, because Riley Leonard needs to stay healthy. If he is healthy, it's going to be him. If it's not, I think Notre Dame's got 3 other quarterbacks that you look at, and we learned a lot about those guys this spring too, from Steve Angeli to Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr. Notre Dame's quarterback room, we said it before the spring, probably in the best position that it's been in collectively in quite some time, maybe ever. And I think a lot of people reaffirm those beliefs that this group is a really, really good one.
Well, Steve Angeli looked great in the Sun Bowl. And then CJ Carr was a big-time recruit. And then Minchie, you just didn't know where he fell once Leonard was brought in, because Minchie was a freshman last year. They bring in Sam Hartman. Now they bring in Leonard. And it pushes people around the depth chart. But they've got 4 guys in the room. They've got 2 guys who've played in games. They've got the blue chip type recruit in CJ Carr. And it feels like everybody's comfortable with it. And like normally you'd expect one of these guys, I would assume, based on how things usually work, is Angeli would be the guy hitting the portal. But it sounds like they're all good.
We assumed it would either be Angeli or Minchie. I think the Sun Bowl that you mentioned was huge for Angeli. He went out there, went 15 of 19, I believe it was, for maybe 230 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He showed that he can start and he can win at Notre Dame. So I think maybe if he didn't have that, we would see Steve Angeli enter the transfer portal. I also know that his family just through and through loves the university. He loves the university. You get a little bit more of that at Notre Dame than you do at other schools. I think you have quarterbacks who are maybe the number 2 or the number 3, and they say, hey, I love this place, but I could go down the road and start there. And I want to start as much as I do love going to school here. So at Notre Dame, you're like, okay, let me just drag this out as long as I can. The degree is something that all of these student athletes are working toward. And it's a little different than getting a degree from, I don't know, Andy, you fill in the blank with whatever school. It's just not Notre Dame.
One of the state schools that you and I went to. How's that sound?
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So there's a little bit of that. And I think the same goes for Kenny Minchie. He hasn't done some of those things that Steve has in games, but he was one of the guys that was talked about. Let's just say this, Andy. They tabbed him with the term gunslinger, and that was quarterbacks coach Gino Guidugli and also some of these wide receivers. When's the last time that you heard a Notre Dame quarterback get called a gunslinger? I don't know if it's ever happened. So
did Brady Quinn ever? I mean,
I don't think he was a gunslinger. He was
a very controlled offense.
Yeah, he's a great quarterback, can throw the ball, but they're saying Kenny Minchie's a gunslinger. So I think that's the cool thing about this Notre Dame quarterback room is you have 4 guys and they can all do completely different things. And they're all kind of out to prove that they can do it at Notre Dame. Not just that they can do it, but they can do it at Notre Dame.
Well, and I think that part about Notre Dame that you were just discussing, I think that really does help them in situations like this, where this is the textbook situation for a quarterback to hit the portal. But you're right. If you're at Notre Dame, if you don't have that degree yet, you're probably going to stick around. Like, you might leave if you've already gotten a degree from Notre Dame. But if you don't, it's worth it for another year if you're going to be the backup. And also, you know, if you're Steve Angeli or if you're either the younger guys, you might be playing because Riley Leonard, injured now, was injured part of last season at Duke. Like, somebody might have to play.
And it wasn't just the ankle that you mentioned getting injured in that Notre Dame game. That was the biggest part of it. And that's what's keeping him out right now. Like you said, he's had 2 surgeries on that ankle that he hurt against Notre Dame last year. But if you remember, I believe it was either the Florida State game or the Louisville game. Those are the 2 games that he played after he got hurt against Notre Dame on September 30th. He came back and played in October a couple times. He had a turf toe injury in one of those games. And that's when he decided, okay, I've got the ankle. Now I've got turf toe. If you've ever played football at this level, you know, and I have not, but I've read enough about it and heard enough of these guys say it. Turf toe, that's nagging. That sticks.
Turf toe needs a rebrand. Turf toe has a bad PR agent because turf toe sounds like a hangnail and is incredibly painful for anyone who has it. So like that, yeah, we just need to rebrand turf toe to understand what Riley Leonard was dealing with last year. Yeah, because those 2 games you played, the Florida State game, the Louisville game, you're like, oh God, I can feel the pain from this guy through the TV screen. He's banged up. So yeah, you're right. There's going to be opportunities there. But I do want to ask you about another kind of in a long line type position. Charles Jagasaw taking over at left tackle. Like, going back to Ronnie Stanley, like when you're the left tackle at Notre Dame, that is now we think you're going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. Like, that, you're essentially being anointed at that point.
Yeah, and being anointed is the perfect way to put it, because everything that we've heard, everything that we've seen from Charles Jagasaw is just it's kind of like Joe Alt 3 years ago. You had no idea that maybe he could be like, he played tight end and quarterback in high school for 3 of his years in high school. He shows up, he grew, I believe he said, in his junior year of high school, and that's when he knew that he was going to play offensive line. But you didn't know that he was going to be the next great offensive lineman. You didn't know that, Harbaugh was going to be calling him a weapon in a NFL draft press conference on Thursday night, like Thursday night of the draft.
Why
this is our weapon.
Exactly. Why they didn't take a receiver instead? Yeah.
So you didn't know that he was going to be that, and you don't know if Charles Jagasaw is going to be that either. But you do know okay, if we've got the confidence to put this guy at that position, like you said, Andy, that's a huge position at the University of Notre Dame, partly because the quarterback has been so up and down. The quarterback position at this university has been so up and down over the years. You know that you need a good left tackle to just sort of solidify things in a way. And they're saying all the right things about Charles Jagasaw. I mean, he's got the size for sure, the athleticism. He came to Notre Dame a little bit banged up, and that's where the similarities to Alt kind of come in for me, because Alt came and you're like, okay, this guy's not going to play right away. Jagasaw didn't play right away because of the injuries, but once he did play, like he played in that Sun Bowl, and it looked good. It looked the part, and I think he's going to be a really good player at that spot.
And Tosh Baker, the right tackle replacing Blake Fisher, is another one who got to play in the Sun Bowl, and you got to see what he could do. And it feels like they're really confident at both of those bookends.
Yeah, Tosh Baker is just huge, like massive individual. If there's one downside to that, it's he can't move as well. And the guy that might be competing to take his position is Emil Wagner, and it's the total opposite. Emil Wagner is sub 300 pounds. Never see that for a tackle at Notre Dame. Just look how big Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, those guys were massive human beings. Emil Wagner is not that, but he provides a little bit of that athleticism. So it's just going to come down to Mike Denbrock, Joe Rudolph, all of these guys, all these coaches that Notre Dame has saying, okay, what do we like? Who has the best upside there? Because Tosh Baker provides a lot of things that Emil Wagner can't, and vice versa. So like you said, I think they do feel very confident in what they have at these tackle positions, but Jagasaw is pretty much penned in. You can put it in Sharpie. He's going to start at left tackle. You got to figure it out on the right side, but you have two really good options.
So Denbrock coming to Notre Dame, he's been at Notre Dame multiple times. He had Jaden Daniels. He had Malik Neighbors. He had Brian Thomas Jr. last year at LSU. Record-setting offense. He's used to having good offensive tackles. He had Will Campbell and Emory Jones, who could be first-round draft picks next year. What does he bring that's different than Jared Parker, who's now gone to become the head coach at Troy?
Yeah, I think Jared Parker was still so new to all of this that he just didn't really have, like, you didn't really know what a Jared Parker offense was. And he took so many elements from Tommy Rees and really so many elements from what Notre Dame has been doing for decades. It was a very much ground and pound. You saw Audric Estime, who just got drafted this past weekend, run the ball 210 times, and he didn't even play in the bowl game. So, he was getting quite a few carries out there. And Notre Dame had a lot of other running backs. I got to give credit to Dylan McCullough for this. It wasn't just Audric Estime. It was Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne. Like, it was ground and pound offense for Notre Dame last year, and that's what it's been for a long time. The quotes to me, Andy, that stick out from Mike Denbrock coming in this first spring that he's been back in his third stint at Notre Dame is the 11 personnel stuff. It's the shotgun snaps. I mean, I was just reading a quote today. I was going back through and just kind of summing some things up from the spring. And Steve Angeli, who's been here for a couple of years, he said, I'm not really used to all these shotgun snaps, but I really like it because it spreads the field out, spreads the ball out, and I'm able to get the ball into a bunch of different playmakers' hands. And that's what stood out to me in the blue gold game as well, was you hear we're going to 11 personnel, and that maybe for some Notre Dame fans, they get in their head, oh man, that means the tight end is less important and we're going to see less of them. Every time I saw a tight end on the field in 11, he was split out wide like a wide receiver. And I believe Eli Raridan, Cooper Flanagan, and Jack Larson, the three healthy scholarship tight ends that Notre Dame had in that game, all had at least 5 targets in that game. And all had at least 3 catches, I believe, with Raridan and Flanagan both having 5, maybe somewhere around there. Like they were being used as pass catchers, being used as weapons. And that's nothing new at Notre Dame, because you've seen Michael Mayer go off. You saw Mitch Evans go off last year in the 8 games that he played before he hurt his knee. But it's less, okay, we have one really good tight end and we're just going to run him into the ground and use him all the time. Yeah. That's what you saw with Mayer and Evans. Now it's, okay, we have 4 or 5 really good tight ends and we can use them as wide receivers if we need to. So it's a lot of really exciting stuff with Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame, because like Angeli said, and like Kenny Minchie said, it's a lot of new stuff for these guys, and it's cutting edge. It's just modernization, Andy, is really all it is. Like Notre Dame is going to look like a modern offense.
11 personnel is one back, one tight end. And the reason the tight ends get targeted more in that is they typically are the ones that get the mismatch, because you put the faster guys on the 3 receivers, And so who's going to get stuck with the slowest safety or with a linebacker covering them? Well, it's probably the tight end, and that's where you make your hay. So I would imagine those Notre Dame tight ends are pretty excited about this.
Absolutely. And like I said, I don't need to say much more about the history of the position at Notre Dame. They've had some really, really good ones. If Mitch Evans comes back from that ACL injury, I'm seeing some stuff that maybe he's being viewed as one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in college football when he's at full tilt. So you have Evans, and then you have a lot of really good guys behind him. That's nothing new at Notre Dame. The way that the Irish are planning to get those guys the ball, that's what's going to be new.
So what have we learned about the Notre Dame defense throughout the spring?
Continuity, cohesion, chemistry, all of those words. Like Al Golden's going into his third year, and he's a guy that a lot of people thought might have gone back to the NFL, or he's a hot commodity. When you lead Notre Dame to a top 5 ranking in yards allowed per game, which quietly they were last year. I know Notre Dame lost 3 games, and we're not close to making a 4-team college football playoff field. But if you go back and you look at the numbers, especially in some of those bigger games, like holding Ohio State to 14 points, and that could have easily been, or 17 points, whatever it was, they could have easily won that game, and it was going to be because of the Notre Dame defense that they did. And it's just a really good group, and you got a lot of really good guys to come back for it. Like your starting tackles are intact. Almost your starting defensive line across the board, if not for Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who, by the way, just got drafted as well. And you replace him with RJ Oben coming in from Duke. They're practically the same player. I see so many similarities in their games, but Howard Cross, Riley Mills in the middle of that defense. Benjamin Morrison, obviously one of the best players on this defense. He had shoulder surgery this offseason, so we're not really sure if he's going to play against Texas A&M on August 31st. But the cornerback room has become such a strength for this team, and that goes back to what I was saying about the continuity and cohesion. Mike Mickens is the longest tenured defensive staffer, maybe on the entire Notre Dame coaching staff. He's been here the longest. It's about half a decade now. He's recruiting guys that can just plug in and play right away. Christian Gray was a freshman last year. Incredible acrobatic interception he made against Pitt. He's probably going to start this year. Obviously, if Morrison is healthy, he's going to start. But Jaden Mickey is a guy that could start at a lot of different places as well. They've done really good in the transfer portal on the defensive side of the ball too. Like I said, getting a guy like Oben to replace Javonte Jean-Baptiste, that's basically a 1-for-1 swap. Getting Jordan Clark from Arizona State to replace Thomas Harper, who played really well coming in from Oklahoma State. He was another transfer that Notre Dame used at the nickel position in 2023. Now you're going to see Clark play the same position in 2024. So just the way that this unit on that side of the ball has been able to remain consistent and just do all the same things, whether it be get guys out of the portal, get guys to stay for 5th or 6th seasons. Jack Kaiser in the middle of the defense as a linebacker who's here for his 6th year. Local kid from Indiana, obviously wants to play as much Notre Dame football as he can, and he plays it really well as well. So just a really good group, a lot of really good players, a lot of really good coaches.
Well, and it's interesting how much athletic depth Notre Dame has now versus years past. And that's something that Marcus Freeman mentioned as something that was critical when he got the head coaching job, that they had to improve that. But I think back to a few years ago in the playoff when they're playing Clemson and they're playing them tough, and then Julian Love goes down. And it's like, oh no, there's nobody else who can cover these receivers. I would imagine that Notre Dame, they could absorb something like that now, and it doesn't end the game for them effectively.
Yeah, and it's what you said about Marcus Freeman and recruiting, and what I said about the transfer portal too. It goes back to what I was saying about Notre Dame being a little different, and you can't really recruit the portal like a Texas can or a Florida can. I'll mention the state schools that you didn't name earlier. You can't recruit the portal like those teams do, but when Notre Dame does, they go out and get a guy like Brandon Joseph from Northwestern, who was an All-American there, and he starts every single game. Or, like I said, Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State. This year it's Jordan Clark from Arizona State. Like, they're getting what they need out of the portal, and those are the guys that kind of keep you afloat and keep you intact, like you were saying. And when one of those guys goes down, the guys that you get from the portal, you're dealing with a bunch of recruits who Notre Dame has not recruited at this level. Like prior to Marcus Freeman, it wasn't humming along like this. You weren't getting the guys that can just come in and play as true freshmen. Benjamin Morrison, 6 interceptions as a true freshman. I mentioned Christian Gray, what he did as a freshman. And it is also I will give props to these guys just sticking around. Like Xavier Watts probably would have heard his name in the NFL draft this past weekend if he would have went. He stayed. He won the Bronco Nagurski Trophy last year. I know there's like 8 different Defensive Player of the Year awards, but he won one of them. So it sounds like a lot, but really that's only going to a select few guys, and he was one of them, and he's back. So it's just the mix, Andy. It's the mix of the young guys coming in and the old guys sticking around.
Well, as Sam Hartman taught us last year, sometimes it's better to play that last year at Notre Dame than head to the NFL a year too early.
Yeah, I mean, look at Sam Hartman. I know he didn't get drafted, and maybe if he would have played better against Clemson, Louisville, those 2 games in particular were tough. But I mean, I just read a Tom Pelissero tweet yesterday that says that he's, signing for a pretty good contract for a guy that didn't get drafted and might be in Washington's plans moving forward. So I guarantee you Notre Dame helped in that regard, because coming out of Wake Forest, I know he had all the numbers, he had all the accolades, but I don't think anybody after 5 years.
They wanted to see him play in a different kind of offense. They wanted to see him play what he played in last year. And now they want to see Riley Leonard play in this offense. And if Riley Leonard can stay healthy, we're talking about probably a different scenario post-draft.
Yeah, I mean, Riley Leonard, athletically, he's got the build, he's got the arm, he's got the size. He can run a little bit, and scouts are in love with that for sure. But then again, it gets him into a little bit of trouble and a little bit of injury. There are injuries that come with being as athletic as a guy like Riley Leonard, because you just put yourself in more spots and more situations to take on contact. And I know Notre Dame is not looking for that this year, given the way that his time in South Bend has started. But what they are looking for is just the complete maturity. And I think maturation is probably the best word, because you watch his film at Duke and you see a raw quarterback at times. And we have to remember, Sam Hartman came here, I think, as a 23-year-old and had played 5 years already. Riley Leonard is a true senior. And when you've only played 3 years of college football, and really 2.5 because of what happened against Notre Dame last year, there's room for growth. You can improve and mature beyond where he is right now. And I think going back to Mike Denbrock, you saw that with Jaden Daniels. Like, he was not the player at LSU, especially in that last year, the year that he won the Heisman Trophy, that he was at Arizona State. At Arizona State, you saw a raw player who liked to use his legs a little bit more than he should. At LSU, you saw a guy that used his legs because he knew he could and when to do it. So I think that's what you're going to see with Riley Leonard, is just the complete growth of his game, going from a guy at Duke that kind of had to carry the team to a guy at Notre Dame that's surrounded by really good tight ends and a wide receiver room, like I said a little bit earlier, that might be as good as it's been at Notre Dame. The running back room, even without Audric Estime, is very good. You have Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. Those guys are fantastic football players. So Riley Leonard is stepping into a good situation. If he could just stay healthy and get his body right, I think he's going to be picked probably maybe even day 2 of the NFL draft a year from now. Like, I think we're talking about maybe a second or third round player if everything goes right this fall at Notre Dame.
Well, and there's a good chance it can, because they do have the pieces around him that he needs. Charles Jagasaw, no pressure, buddy. No pressure
Exactly.
in that spot. But Tyler, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.